Hello everyone, today is April 12th, 2015, and this is Overgrowth Weekly 94 with Q&A number 10. My name is Lukas.
I'm David Rosen.
I'm Anton Real.
I'm Aubrey, sir.
And yeah, this time we will be kicking it off right away with some questions from the community. We will be starting out with a question from Melee Panda right here. And this will be, all the questions from now on will, I guess, kind of be, I mean, it's slightly weird because most questions are about like, how will this system evolve and so on. And now since there's a big chance that we will move, like the production will move to a different engine. I say we, I'm of course not involved in it, but the production will move to a different engine. It sometimes becomes more of a question like, how will it become in the future? So this is the question. David, will you improve the AI, particularly in terms of environment navigation? Currently, there is no way that I can tell for the AI to stop you if you decide to run.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important feature when working on the single-player campaign, because, like, it's true. Like right now, you can basically just like parkour past everyone in a level and just kind of rush to the end. So we definitely need tools to make that not possible. And there are a lot of different options for that. Like the AI could just be able to like tackle you in the air, or they could throw weapons at you, but only when you're not facing them. There are a lot of different solutions to that problem, but we definitely have to pick one of them.
Yeah.
Is there any one of those solutions that you are leaning more towards, like that you want to try out first?
I think tackling is the most appealing, like being able to grab on the ground or in the air or both, where you kind of like turn into like a attached ragdoll and like fall to the ground. Because Lugaru had kind of this grabbing out of the air system, which helped with that. That didn't quite solve it, and the wolves had a tackle. I'd probably start by working on that again.
Cool. But like, if you run away from an opponent, if you do, because you said that you want to implement some, like the animal run. If you start running away from an opponent, is it meant that you should be able to just run forever away from the opponent, or will they be able to actually like catch up to you somehow?
I think they should probably be able to catch you if you're the same species. Like, if you're a rabbit, you can run away from a dog or other, like, heavy, slower creature. But in general, the pursuers should have an advantage. There are a lot of different ways to do that. Like, the most gamey way to do it would be like a drafting type thing. Like, maybe Animal Run only happens when you're chasing someone. So if you're running away, they just always run faster.
Mm.
That's not very realistic, but that might be one way it could work.
You could have all these like cool slipstream effects afterwards when you want to like
Yeah.
run into them. All right, cool. So another question here from Malek Tak, who asks, how do you actually determine attack priority? I know when faced with multiple targets, Turner will hit the first one who will hit him. Do you just do a sphere check to see who is in range, then check who's attacking? And then another person adds to that question, it's actually Sehiro from the forums, adds, to that question I would add, will eventually be implemented mouse direction as a factor determining the target?
Yeah, that's about right. Basically, it just checks the nearest threat. And there is no mouse direction right now. And I think there should be, because if someone's attacking you from behind, you don't even see them. You shouldn't necessarily prioritize them, because you don't even know what's going on. And I definitely need to improve the prioritization system, because right now you still sometimes will like kick a dead body even though there's someone nearby. So maybe there should be like multiple sphere checks. So it'd be like, are you even in combat? And if so, then you can't just like punish dead people.
Mm-hmm. So is that how you want the targeting to work in the end? Like who the mouse, like the camera direction or the character direction, or how will that work?
I think it'll have to be some kind of combination. Like there's a prioritization scheme. Like every nearby character gets a score, which will be increased based on how much of a threat they are, and also increased based on how much you're looking at them. So you shouldn't have to do like pinpoint targeting like you would in like Dark Souls or something like that. But it's also not entirely automatic.
All right, nice. He also asks, that's Malek Taktako asks, is determining hit/miss really as simple as constructing model-accurate hitboxes and checking for collisions? If so, how do you prevent weirdness like Turner's walk animation causing his fist or foot box to touch an enemy? Does each animation have events to activate/deactivate the appropriate hurt boxes at the appropriate time?
It's actually even a lot more simple than that. It's more like every animation or every attack animation has a certain time that it will attack and a certain height. And then it just checks, like, is the other character at that height? Are they crouching or standing? And then I rely on all of the animation system to make the physical positions correct. So it's kind of the opposite of what he's saying. Like, instead of the physics of the characters determining whether you hit or not, it's more like the gameplay determines whether you hit or not, and then the animation system sets up the animations to reflect that.
So I know that some people have sort of, I would say, complained in quotes, but people have commented, you know, if you're jumping and someone accidentally hits you in the foot or hits you in the ear, it can cause you to you know, ragdoll or something. Is that something that is I don't know how to say it. Like, is that solvable with a system like this then?
I think so. There's just always a trade-off between like how controllable do you want it to be and how physically accurate. Because if you're relying entirely on hurt boxes, then you can get into these weird situations where someone's like crouching in such a way that you can't hit them just because your animations aren't quite lined up right.
Mm-hmm.
Or like somebody's lying on the ground, you have to figure out which of my animations will make my fist go low enough. Like I've been playing Bloodborne a lot recently and keep running into that situation. There are these little snake characters on the ground and I have to figure out like which of my different attacks will move my hitbox low enough that I can actually hit this snake.
Right.
And that's just a strange feeling. Like I should just always hit the thing that I'm trying to hit.
Well, I mean, I would think that if someone is prone and laying on the ground, you should be forced to crouch to be able to hit them, no?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Like you could just kick them. Like in Overgrowth, there's this kind of soccer kick thing, where if someone's on the ground, you run at them, you just like punt them, like a soccer ball.
Right. That tends to be if they're ragdolled as opposed to like there is no actually going prone in Overgrowth, right? So at least not currently. So you would never use it as a dodge tactic. But you can crouch to dodge a roundhouse kick, a high roundhouse kick, right?
Yeah.
So it is possible to use sort of the animation to predict whether or not you would. But as you said, it's based on the height, right?
Yeah.
Is it easy to jump over a sweep? I can't remember if that's true or not.
It's mostly about flags. It's like the sweep is flagged as a low attack, and then the jump makes you immune to low attacks, and things like that.
Got it.
That's kind of there's a simplified system that ends up affecting all of the animations and the logic. Some of the systems, I guess, there's a mismatch between some areas where like thrown weapons are entirely physics-based, so it's all about like whether they hit with the right angle and hit with a sharp edge or the blunt edge. And then the base combat is much more controlled.
I see.
So it would be nice to make that more consistent.
Right. Now, I know that those two items have. Never mind. It's unrelated. Sorry. We should move on.
So that's just a core design for Lugaru, and then Overgrowth is just this pet peeve I had of attacking the air and whiffing, like in Street Fighter. Like, it's definitely a design thing. It's not a critique of Street Fighter necessarily, but has this video gamey look where people are frequently doing these crazy attacks where it can't possibly hit the enemy just because they're not in range. And just kind of wanted to make that impossible, and that's a big part of how it can help make each fight look more like a action movie choreographed fight.
Right. So I basically either you have to hit or you have to do a dodge that makes it obvious why you didn't hit.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
David, sometimes when in fights, I find that when I do an attack, I get hit by the opponent, or like when I jump away from the opponent and he attacks, I get hit by the opponent even though I'm too far away to actually get hit, like graphically speaking.
Yeah,
Is there
that's a
any
problem
plans
with
to-
the edge case. I definitely want to fix that. And part of that, I think, would be to modify the attacks to make them go a bit farther. And also they have to take velocity into account. So, like, you'd want a special attack if someone's moving away from you while you're attacking. So you might have like a more mobile, like jump kick type attack. Right now, most of the attacks are pretty stationary. So it's hard to hit someone that's running around, even if they're running very predictably.
Yeah. I could see like a little sidestep, jump kick, or other things like that. It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Like if they're trying to run away and you do your like foot attack or whatever, you'll like jump after them and do something cool. That would be really good to get the choreographed look, I think.
Yeah. There's a bit of a trade-off there between like how much precision you require from the player. You have to find the right balance for that. Like I wouldn't, like if you look at Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, they really went for the choreographed look, and they made it so if you're far away from someone, you can be as far away as you want, and he'll kind of create this really acrobatic prelude to whatever you're doing. He'll like roll and then cartwheel and do a backflip and then do your attack. And Batman and Assassin's Creed kind of have a similar approach. It's not quite so acrobatic, but if you're far away, they'll kind of like do a bunch of shuffle steps and then hit.
Yeah, I always found that weird where in the Arkham Batman franchise where you would just like jump to a person that was off screen behind you that you couldn't see, but you land this amazing punch combination.
There might be some middle ground there, where maybe you have a system where you can do that, but you only do it if someone was in range and then is moving out of range in a predictable way, or something like that.
Right. Cool.
All right. So we had another question there from the same person who asked if that's Malek Tak Tak, I should say. Tak Tak, yes. If that's the case, now that models can be fat/skinny, tiny/huge, how do you control for unbalanced caused by weird model shapes, like a tall wolf's punch going over the head of a short rat? And I guess that kind of answers that question too, because like the animations would then adjust to fit this new situation, right?
Yeah, like all of the attacks have high and low a range of like blend animations. So you'll have like high spin kick, low spin kick, medium spin kick, and that will take into account just where his head is, which takes into account how big he is and if he's on a slope or on some kind of platform. So it should usually line up. Like it'll get weird sometimes if you have like a Godzilla character versus like a mouse character, but it works in most cases.
Yeah, I was actually
Sweet.
thinking of a mod that, or a custom map that had a Godzilla-sized character, and when you fight them, you basically hit them in the shin all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
At that point, we basically need to make like Shadow of the Colossus type combat.
Yeah.
Where you climb around all over them.
Yeah, it doesn't quite seem like a core gameplay feature set. I can't imagine that you're going to have too many enemies that are really towering over you. other than the whale man.
Yeah. So I want to figure out something for like rats versus wolves, where they can sort of cling onto them and like stab with their little knives and stuff, and make
That'd
it
be fun.
different than the normal like 1 versus 1 dueling mode.
So
Kind of want to add more like qualitative differences between the characters.
so it's almost alternate combat styles depending on your class a little bit, or race, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds cool.
Great. So we have a question from the chat here. I think we mentioned, I think it was last week. It's as I said, it's said from the forums. He asks, any news about Akazi's Ligari maps porting, and when can we expect a new alpha? So what was the thing with Akazi's Ligaro map porting?
So he already basically successfully ported all of the Lugaru campaign maps over with the features that we already have. But it's missing some of the features that I would have to add, like staff combat and like proper dialogues. Like the dialogue system works pretty well, but it kind of fails when the dialogue gets too long because you can't scroll the screen up and down.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to figure out about the engine situation before committing more engineering time to that, I think. Because if I'm going to be switching anyway, then I shouldn't be investing more time in the editor that we currently have. So that's kind of in limbo right now.
Yeah, okay. I think that answers that quite well. And for the other part of the question, and when can we expect a new alpha? I think we kind of talked about that last time as well. But maybe
It's
you can
kind
give
of
an
a
update,
similar
like-
situation.
Yeah,
I have to
like
figure
a
out
couple of months
exactly
or something, yeah.
what I'm doing first.
Yeah, exactly. So it's on the month scale at least.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Great. So a question here from G-Man for the Free Man. Nice name. He asks, hey guys, I have a question I've wanted to ask you for years. One of the things I love most about Overgrowth is its big open freeform level, but I've always been curious about all the giant stone shapes, prism that are usually square or hexagon on the top, in them. Are they just placeholders or are they relics of a forgotten civilization? And yes, I think they're cool.
Those are going to be in the final game in some form. They're not placeholders, but we also don't want to talk too much about where they came from, because that might be something you find out during the campaign.
Okay.
Cool. I think Aubrey, you did some. Didn't you have some? I thought you had some like theories or something. I remember some kind of blog post. I think that you did or about these things.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to. It's not really relevant to the. I think so. Like the theme that I think is interesting about that stuff is the idea that the animal critters are in a world that they don't really understand, and to help the player understand, like to sympathize with the animals, there has to be some kind of like aspect of the environment that the player doesn't understand either, right? So like that's kind of, I think that it serves a function that those are kind of mysterious and are not really explained. I think with like kind of primitive people, it's easy to think, oh, they're just dumb. Why don't they understand this basic stuff? So it's useful to have something like that where it's just not explained at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in that stuff. It seems really, yeah, it's just mysterious. I think it's really great that it adds some sort of mystery to the world, like you say.
There is. It's not just like random stuff that we made up. There is some explanation, just like with science, there's reasons that things happen even if we don't understand those reasons. So that's one of the themes there.
Cool. So we have here question 15 by Maxwell218. He says, all right, that's my first question on Overgrowth Weekly. I'm really curious if there's going to be a story for each race. What I mean is that there will be a story for the rat, rabbit, wolf, dog, and cat clans so that we can experience different relations and such. And he says, by the way, I really like these videos. Keep up the good work.
So things are a bit up in the air right now, but that is what I had in mind. That we would have playable stories for each of the different races, so you could explore all of their different abilities and how they all interact.
One thought about it is, like, from a gameplay perspective, obviously there's differences between playing a rat or a dog, but from a story perspective, the divisions are not really like so based on their species. So, you know, like raiders, for example, there's like a variety of different species in a raider group. So like, I think that there's a lot of other options in terms of like exploring the content in the game world that's beyond just like, oh, this is the rat campaign or something, right? Like there might be the raider campaign, or there might be, you know, this civilization or that civilization.
Kind of want to do more prototypes based on the differences between the species in terms of gameplay and gameplay in general. Like try and make these levels that are just like capsule people moving around and having their interactions. I have this issue where I keep on like diving into details, and I need to figure out a framework that can force me to focus on the more overall interactions. You can test out things like the rats jumping on the wolves and how that works with the gameplay without ending up getting distracted by like, how does the wolf fur line up with the rat hands, and how does the blood work with all of the different stabbing and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan on, like you've mentioned a lot of times, or you talked about that you want to make the development more on the like critical path to get the game finished? Do you think that will change how you do that kind of stuff too? So maybe you make just a really, really rough early version of that just works and doesn't really look good, but it works gameplay wise. And then you do that with everything and then go back and do another pass and everything to make it look good or something like that? Or will you still work in that kind of way where you go in and make one feature really, really good from the start?
Yeah, I kind of want to try doing like a rough to fine pass, which is kind of the traditional approach, and I think it's probably traditional for a reason. Like, maybe. I've been doing the details, and the details are pretty cool and work well with our video format. And I think people like all the details, like with the ragdolls and the dripping blood and everything. Mm-hmm. But I think we're really missing like the broad strokes. So I need to figure out a way to get myself to focus on that. Like, it's worked in game jams where we have like a very short deadline, but Overgrowth doesn't really have any external deadline. So we have to figure out a new workflow for that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right, I just gotta find a new question, man.
Oh, all right. Have you started ever thinking about making your own deadlines? You know, maybe some goals to try and reach, anything like that?
Yeah, we've tried doing that a few times, like making schedules and internal deadlines, but it just doesn't really work because they're kind of made up, like they're not real.
Right. You don't feel any pressure to actually uphold them.
Yeah.
So
like there are some deadlines that kind of worked when we're like, we need to get this done for IGF to have a cool 1 versus 1 demo, and then that gets done. But in general, it's hard to make imaginary schedules work.
Right. Would it be more like, so things like IGF are places where essentially you're showing the public what you are working on. if you made those deadlines more public and said, this is what we're going to work on until this date, and then we're going to show you what you have, would you feel more obligated? The deadlines would be less imaginary?
Maybe.
Like, one of the things that's weird about the game jams is like, yeah, the game jams have a real deadline, and it's incredibly stressful, but like a lot of it is just kind of, we start the game jam and then we work as hard as we can, as long as we can. It's not even really about when the jam ends. It's just when we become too exhausted to do anything. So, so even in those situations, I think that it's not really about the actual posted deadline. It's just like we have this kind of thing that we do with these rules that we start off with, and we follow those rules, until we can't do it anymore. And like, I don't think that's super healthy. So I'm not sure how we can get that to work for like a really long-term development.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. Like, I think that's the problem with like development in general. And I think that's the reason why when you work at a big company, as far as I've heard, they like to pile on like loads of stuff. Like you need to have like the world complete after this sprint or whatever. And that is just to give you something that you need to rush to complete, because otherwise it feels like, oh, it's just so big, like we just like work at like a normal pace or whatever, and then it doesn't get done as fast as it could.
Yeah. Another thing I'd point out though about AAA development is that they do those sorts of things, but they're not healthy either. I mean, like kind of the game industry is famous for being extremely terrible in terms of quality of life. So like looking to them for a solution doesn't really make sense to me either.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think figuring out a good, like, broad defined detail workflow is the most appealing thing to try out right now. Whether that's in the Overgrowth engine currently or in Unreal. That's part of the appeal of Unreal to me, I think, is that when I'm trying to do prototypes in the Overgrowth engine, I keep on wanting to add new features. Or like there's something that just doesn't quite work yet. It's like, okay, in this prototype I need to draw text that follows the character around, so I have to make a whole system for that, and now to draw text I have to make sure free type is doing that efficiently, which means I need to make like a text atlas, and then I have to figure out how to pack the text atlas efficiently and make sure that the font hinting is right so it lines up with all the pixels. Everything just has like a big chain of sub-problems. And that might be a way to kind of skip that, because most of the common sub-problems are probably already solved.
And those are interesting things to do, of course, but it really slows things down to have to do them for everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Then I have to deal with all the feedback, like, why aren't you doing anything? You're so lazy.
You're like, but the pixels didn't line up. Don't you see? You wouldn't be able to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have so I mean, I know that you're kind of playing with Unreal now and seeing how, what it is, if it's worth it, etc. Do you have like a time frame, an amount of time you plan to play with it before making a decision?
I think probably within a week or two, I should have a pretty good plan.
I see. And are you willing to share with us where you're at with that testing? Like, do you have characters that can run around? Have you ported any maps? Is any of the combat in Unreal at this point, etc., etc.?
I was mostly testing out the core movement and also netcode to see how much that would work. So I have these like squishy capsule guys with all of the Overgrowth controls, and they can squash and tilt and have all of that, the core procedural movement stuff working. And you can load up like four windows of it that are all networked.
I did test out like loading level assets and models and stuff. It's all pretty trivially easy. Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. Getting the shaders, recreating the shaders in Unreal so that they're like the Overgrowth shaders is a little bit more complicated, but I was able to come up with somewhat decent results in a few hours, so I kind of considered that a success and didn't pursue it further. There's still some stuff I need to try in terms of art production, but I think it's all so far so good kind of thing.
That's cool.
Yep, sounds pretty great.
But yeah, I mean, like, as much as it's cool to play around with Unreal, we are still like absolutely not anywhere close to making the final decision. We're still very much internally debating like what course of action to take. So I don't want anybody to draw like the false conclusion that just because we like it Unreal, that we've given up on our existing code base, because it's just not, those aren't really related questions, right? Like, yeah, if Unreal was terrible, then we wouldn't even consider it. But just because it's good doesn't mean that we prefer it over some other course of action.
Right.
There's also kind of hybrid options, because like it is all open source, so I can just take pieces of Phoenix and use them as it is. Because the most interesting parts of Unreal is like there's the core platform layers, so it can work on like iOS, PS4, Xbox One, all that stuff. And there's the front end, which is all about like rendering and materials. And those are the parts that are really interesting, but like the inner logic loops, I don't care about too much. So we could probably use some of our existing stuff.
Interesting. I know I've seen that question asked, although not officially in our thread, that if you were to switch to something like Unreal, would you consider a console release?
That's one of the things I'm still evaluating. Because I think the game would work really well on consoles. Like
right.
It plays very well with controllers, and the local multiplayer is fun. Like it's fun having tournaments on a couch and so on.
Exactly.
But then there's all sorts of craziness, like their technical requirements checklists and mod support, and how well we could do like early access. There's all sorts of pros and cons there, but I definitely want to look into it. It's definitely a factor when thinking about the engine.
Right. Because to port your engine to consoles would be a much more daunting task, I imagine.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more work. Yeah. I'd have to kind of make a bunch more rendering paths.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to cut it there. I think Aubrey needed to be somewhere.
Yeah,
also.
I'm sorry, guys. I'd actually have something planned for 1 o'clock, so I need to get ready and head on out. But thanks for having me for Overgrowth Weekly. It's a joy, as always, and I'll be around next week, I think, so, or next time. So I'll see you guys then. Take it easy.
Bye, Aubrey.
See ya. So maybe we should cut the show here as well, since 35 minutes right by now. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Remember to post your questions in the forums. There's a link to it on ogweekly.com, and tweet at us or ask in the chat during the show. Yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.